a good plan and stick to the plan.
Right.
So he kind of...
Money's there. Those financial advisors, because of the SEC laws and the rules, they can't really invest in a lot of different things that are higher risk or that may make you more money. Their investments are a lot safer. I'm super excited to be going over our book that we are going over today. We are reading Rich Dad's Guide to Investing, and David will be covering the intro through chapter 7 today. Take it away, my friend.
Yes. So we kind of start off the book, and he kind of goes into kind of a good idea of what we're going to discuss in the book. He also in the intro kind of talks about why the rich get richer with some certain laws that are kind of put in place. Does anybody kind of want to jump onto that? Was that kind of new for anybody? Talking about the SEC and some of their laws.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really know like a lot about that when I first read this book about the accredited investors and things like that. Like the stuff that you really make the money off of. Yeah, you can't get into it unless you've got money. It just kind of stinks. Like if you want to make the money, you gotta pay to play, I guess, or however you want to put it. So, but there's like a legal thing there.
Yeah,
preventing you.
I knew there were legal entities and there were rules. I don't think I knew to the extent of the rules as far as investing goes, but I can tell you that the intro, since I am now interviewing financial advisors, has changed my list of questions.
Good.
Yes,
Good.
it definitely changed the list of questions that I will be asking as we are interviewing. I think I have a meeting either today or tomorrow with another one. So I'll be excited to put those questions into place because I want to understand, when you go with somebody like Edward Jones, well, a lot of times, I don't know if you know this, but part of the reason we left Edward Jones was because if your money's there, those financial advisors, because of the SEC laws and the rules, they can't really invest in a lot of different things that are higher risk or that may make you more money. Their investments are a lot safer, right? But that's not necessarily what you're looking for long term.
Right. Which he calls sanitized investment.
Correct.
Natalie, anything that you kind of learned from the intro that maybe shocked you?
Yeah, exactly that. I was impressed and surprised, and I didn't know that there was guidelines like that out there, but definitely need to learn more about that part of the investment world.
So one thing I kind of like about the intro, and actually even more so in chapter 1, it kind of tells it in story form. Some of the story was from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but he kind of paints the picture that I kind of relate to, and it's like, okay, well, really he's just starting from nothing, and honestly, so is his day, and it's like I can relate to coming out of high school and coming out of college, not so much basic training, and just thinking to myself, okay, well, what's next? At that point, I kind of knew I wanted to get into investing, but I had no idea about the quadrants. I had no idea that I was getting into the E quadrant. But who else kind of relates to that, and how so?
Well, it kind of stinks that like his poor dad / real dad and him are at the exact same spot. And like his dad's like 25 years, 30 years older than him, and they're not close. They're like in the exact same spot. They're unemployed and they got no money.
Exactly.
He's got 30 years head start on him, and that thinking is what kind of woke me up in the first book. That thinking of we can't think like that anymore. Not in this world. We got to think more long term. We got to think different than everybody else thinks.
Right.
And it's another one of those slaps in the face of we got to wake up. To get down business.
Right. For me, when I was kind of going through it, and I don't remember where he inserts this question. I love how all of our books are giving us questions like, does it make the boat go faster? Well, is this a wealthy person's perspective or is this a poor person's perspective? And I love how kind of in that intro, he starts talking a little bit about how your perspective is probably where you're going to, in chapter 1, what your perspective is where you're going to end up. If you think that, I have a client right now who literally told me the other day, she's strategically staying poor because in her brain, it's easier with the government health insurance and these different benefits. And it was like, when he was reading that part, I was like, oh, well, all she has to do is now strategically be wealthy, and she will be. I mean, you got to put some work into it, but why would you strategically choose to be in that environment? And a lot of times it's because of lack of education, his 3 E's, I don't remember what they all
education, experience, and excess cash.
Correct. And so education is so important. And I just think that it was another eye-opening question. Am I looking at this from the eyes of somebody who is wealthy? Or I'm looking at this from the eyes of somebody who is not. And then I love how he starts talking about systems. I think that's later in the book, though.
Right. So actually, you kind of touched on this a little bit. So like the 3 E's, he talks about this in he starts it in chapter 1, where he talks about what should I invest in? Which I kind of like the way he puts these chapters together, because he kind of throws out a lot of questions that get asked. So for instance, in one of the chapters, he actually talks about giving advice on a panel, and somebody called in and
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for book club today. We are reading Rich Dad's Guide to Investing, chapters 8 through the end of 14. And David will be leading our conversation. So take it away there, my friend.
Yes. So in the first few chapters, we talk about basically how boring an investment is and how important it is to have a good plan and stick to the plan. Right. So he and it's really funny how he kind of like goes through this. So getting rich is automatic. So if you have a good plan, stick to it. That's investor lesson 8. Lesson 9 is how can you find the plan that is right for you? That one was hard for me. Take your time. Ask yourself, what do I want from this gift of life? Don't talk to anyone. For a while, and then never too late to start, obviously, and then call it investment. Which of those really hit you guys?
So right now, Steve, I don't know if you took this away from the conference as well, but it seemed like the theme through the entire conference all week was it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so coming up with the plan and sticking to it. I mean, just yesterday, you and I were evaluating in a house and we were like, well, we could make X, but X isn't the bottom line in our plan. And so for me, I think the next 6 months through the year, I guess 7 months through the year.
Can I call a timeout? What's this con that I keep hearing about? I may just be an inexperienced bug, or maybe I'm not an agent.
Or the event.
The conference.
What's the name of it?
Shareholders. It was a shareholders conference.
Yeah.
Because when you're at EXP, you're shareholders, baby. You own the company.
That's right. It. You own it, my friend. But that was the consistent theme through in almost every single class that I took was stop chasing all the shiny objects. Stop trying to get rich quick. Stop trying to make it happen overnight. Think about if you would have stuck to a plan, started it 10 years ago, where you would be today if you would have that plan. And so I am spending the next 2 weeks, and Natalie and I even talked about this yesterday on her coaching call with me, was we're going to revamp and we are rewriting our 1-3-5s, and we are going to come up with a plan and start with some accountability. So for me, it was just a nice reiteration of everything that I kind of heard, the book and the conference just kind of going hand in hand there.
Good. It's the same, the realtors that were up there, like all of them, like the hot shots that we all think that they're hot shots because we think that they, chase shiny objects, but they don't. They just kind of look sexy on stage because they're winning. That's why it looks sexy.
So today we are doing our book club and we are reading Rich Dad's Guide to Investing. And we are going to be reviewing chapters 15 through 19, which completed section 1 of the book. And David is our fearless leader, so take it away, my friend.
Awesome. So these couple of chapters really kind of ended off phase 2. And so chapter 15, he actually kind of starts to talk about why he thinks investing isn't as risky as, other people may say. He talks about being able to read financial statements and financial literacy that really kind of helps him reduce risk. What did you guys think of this chapter? Did this make sense? Was there anything that kind of, maybe left you guys with questions, maybe any new ideas?
So for me, I guess I had a big aha when he said you need to look at 2 different financial statements before pulling the trigger on certain investments, because on this financial statement, it looks like an income producing item. On this financial statement, it could actually be a liability. So that was a huge aha. I don't think I would have ever thought about that on my own.
Right. So to kind of reminder kind of what he was talking about there. So that's the income statement and balance sheet. Income statement, you can think of what were the results of your company over a period of time from income and expense standpoint. Then you have your balance sheet, which you can think of as like a snapshot. Somebody took a snapshot of your business right then and there. What assets, liabilities, and how much of it do you have? That's kind of what those are for. Steve, Natalie, anything to add in this chapter?
No, but I told my husband that we need to do 2 months worth of income statements and see where we land right now.
Right. I mean, this is just a continuation of what we were talking about last week, just the importance of, because like he talked about, he and Rich Dad's son, like they were brought up like reading these, like
Exactly.
when they were kids. So it's like, and it goes to that whole, it's not risky investing if you not only know it, but you digest it, all of that, you know what I mean? It's like, there's nothing that's foolproof, nothing that it doesn't have risk, but I mean, you just mitigate so much of it by digesting all that stuff.
Exactly. Has anybody taken a stab at their own financial statement, personal or business? Does this book give you a little bit of easier idea of how to start that?
I think so. I think for me, it at least gives you an outline of what you should be looking for, right? As you go through, like here are different things you're looking for, and here are different ways to look at it. I feel like he got very into teaching, but teaching how to learn the items that he's trying to teach you.
Right.
He took everything down very much to an elementary school level, in my opinion, through these last few chapters as he was kind of going over the different ins and outs of the financial statements and what they meant and what they look, what to look for, what to look at, and that kind of stuff.
Right. What did you guys think about? So Robert said mistakes kind of lead to magic. What did you guys think of that?
So I think he's true. I think it's a very true statement. I think a lot of times we tend to beat ourselves up for making mistakes, and using it as a environment where you can grow and learn from, I think is awesome. And it kind of made me think of like the creation of the light bulb, right? It took Thomas Edison, I don't know, like 9 million chances or tries to create a light bulb. And instead of looking at it as a mistake or a failure, he looked at it as a positive. This is how not to do it. So I know not to make the same mistake in the past or in the future. And I thought that was kind of a good reminder to look at mistakes that way, because I think it's really easy to get in the ditch when you feel like everything you're touching is falling apart. Like literally everything you're touching is falling. Today, we are going to be discussing Rich Dad's Guide to Investing. And we
20 to 26.
I was going to say, we pretty much, I think, powered through most of section 2, right? Okay, perfect. All right, David, take it away.
This read, I actually really kind of like this read because we're essentially getting into the meat of the conversation. As we kind of talk through it, just kind of think of what stories, what quotes, and maybe what like selection of words kind of helps you with the technicality of like the things that he's talking. Starting off, he's talking about solving the 90-10 riddle, and then he goes into the different types of investors. So solving the 90-10 riddle, one of the stories he talks about here is, McDonald's. They're not in the business of selling hamburgers. They're in the business of real estate. Right. And so he also goes into, in this chapter, like the BI triangle, which to me I love because it's almost like a visual way of how to set up a business. And so I actually did a little bit more research, and he used his wallet business as an example. When he went back to his rich dad, he was looking for money, looking to raise capital. And he said, well, why would I invest in a business in a product that has a terrible business? And so this is how he came up with the BI triangle, because, he needed to systemize not only the product, but, how the business runs, how the business raises capital, all these different things. And so in this chapter, we kind of talk about the killer of ideas as well. Solving the 90-10 riddle. I think when we talked about it once finishing up the first part of the book, does it give you a different perspective of the 90-10 riddle?
I'm mad that they made it go from 80-20 to 90-10.
That's just Kiyosaki. He pisses you off. It just, that's his thing. No, but it's the eternal question of, so you want assets, you want assets to pay for stuff. But so the riddle is, how can I create them myself instead of buy them? And I talked about this last week, and now we got into it in this chapter, talked about the comic books.
Right.
I got to thinking, because we're talking about hiring a VA finally. And we interviewed some people yesterday, and I'm trying to decide, because the transaction coordinator I work with, she needs some help because she's trying to get back into real estate herself. So I'm trying to come up with an idea. Wait a minute, could we hire a VA to do some of her and kind of create like kind of a little sub company to help her? So, but it's thinking like that, like how can you, it's always having your mind open, because we're all surrounded by it. We're not thinking about it.
Well, and I think that's probably the biggest takeaway when he talks about it, is getting out of your comfort zone and getting creative, right? I mean, that's why my conversation with this client went as far and as deep as it did. Because he was like, he was thinking, okay, dad can buy these houses. He's got all this equity. How can we go to a conventional lender? I'm like, conventional lender? No, wrong. Like, it'll slow you down. Dad has to let's go to a hard money lender. Let's use his equity as his portion, get 5 times the multiple, whatever you bring to the table. And the next thing you know, you're sitting on $500,000, and it was a much easier, shorter process. Now it cost him a little bit more, but it will get him to netting more much quicker. And so I think that, looking at everything through the eyes of, is this going to make the boat go faster? Mm-hmm. Helps you get to that 90% of the wealth and in 10% of the people's pockets, because those are the people that look at everything creatively and make sure that they're making wise purchases and they're buying assets and not liabilities.
Right. Natalie, anything to add?
No, that's interesting. I was just talking to my dad actually about this morning and about his beginning in real estate, and because he's always asking me how my journey's going. And we were discussing about the liabilities and assets that they used to have when they were younger. And I told him.
So today we are doing Robert Kiyosaki. Don't ask me to say his last name. Fuck it.
Kiyosaki.
The car, the bike, the whatever. Yes. Rich Dad's Guide to Investments. And we are going over a lot of chapters. I don't remember which ones, and I don't have my phone in front of me. I'm sorry, I'm in vacay mode.
No, good. It's all good. So chapter 27 to 36. So I feel like the first couple of chapters kind of talk through the how and why. So we talk about starting off how to get rich slowly. We talk about keeping your day job and still becoming rich. And then we talk about the entrepreneurial spirit and why build a business. So in reading these, was there anything that really kind of stuck out during these chapters as, something that I really need to, implement into my business? Or, even if it's, that's what that's called. So whenever I do this is what he's talking about, and maybe some instruction to kind of add to.
So for me, I knew this. It's not new, but the necessity of a plan, of some kind of structure, of some kind of idea of knowing where your end goal is, I think is kind of probably the biggest thing I'm taking away right now, because he's talking about how, like to your point, he stayed working and he sold the Xerox machines for the 2 years or whatever it was, and all of his steps that he took. And I think I'm moving away from the need for it to feel like a sprint and understanding that this is totally a marathon.
Right.
And how it's kind of detached from, because you have to have the plan. It has to be on the side. It goes over time. So it's not like I think that was the thing that took out of it. It was nothing really like earth shattering or whatever, but It was just a reminder of, it has to be on the side. It has to be built. It has to be running alongside you the whole time. It doesn't have to be earth shattering, but it has to be a plan.
It's boring.
That was the thing. So.
Right. So one thing I want to talk about, Steve, this may be a question for you, because I know you read Cash Flow Quadrant.
Right.
So in here, when he talks about getting rich slowly, and I feel like one of the biggest ahas for me was kind of like keep your day job and still become rich. But he essentially kind of talks about the concept of switching quadrants, right? So it's like you could be on the left-hand side of the quadrant where you're in the E and the S scenario, right. But then he talks about how to take that and kind of run it into like the other side of the column to kind of work on getting your investments going, getting your businesses going. And so he references the cash flow quadrant quite a bit. Is this something he talks about in detail within the cash flow quadrant book?
Well, I mean, one of the big things he talks about in that is the difference in tax breaks and tax benefits that you get in each sector, and also like the skills that you need to be in each one of them, and how you need to go from one to the other. And it's easy. Probably the smoothest transition is like E to S to B to I.
Right.
But you can go from E to S to I, or even E to I, but E to I is very hard. E to S to I is very hard. But he talks about, I think the higher up you go, obviously the better the tax advantages are, and then the more you get to invest and whatever, because that's the thing. I mean, you want to, and Laura's talking about this all the time about, like, her business buys her stuff and you get the credit off the business and whatever. And it's like, it makes, so the cash flow quadrant is just you can't just think of, all right, what do I want to do next? Do I want to have my own thing, or do I want to, like, there's a spot that you belong in one of those 4 quadrants. And each one of those quadrants has a strength and a weakness, with the biggest one being the tax advantages. I mean, for me, I feel like when I was on a team, I was really more of an E than an S. Now I feel like I'm an S trying to turn into a B.
Right.
Obviously, I think he defines B really being more than just like a 3-person team or 4-person team. Like,
we are reading Rich Dad's Guide to Investment, and I have no idea what chapters we were going over. I just read for about 2 hours.
So 37 to 40, I didn't text it. I sent it via email. So
To read what through what?
So 37 to 40. And
I got to 39.
Sweet. Awesome. Good enough. So we'll kind of go through basically 37's how a sophisticated investor thinks. This one's really kind of already been kind of driven pretty well. So by the time we got to this chapter, it almost feels like he's repeating himself. But he starts to get to analyzing investments, and he talks about the actual ultimate investor. And then the chapter after that actually is, are you the next billionaire? So the reason I kind of broke it out like this is because he really kind of talks about analyzing businesses and essentially selling businesses and your exit strategies. And so analyzing investments, he goes through a few different ratios, and he essentially says, like, the numbers tell a story. So for instance, the gross margin percentage, that'll let you know, how much money are you making off of your revenue? Are you having to do returns? Are you spending too much on cost of goods? Net operating margin will just let you know if you're taking those gross margins and just spending it. Then you've got your operating leverage, your financial leverage, which kind of tells you a little bit more about how you have the company structured. And then you kind of get into debt to equity, total leverage, and then return on equity, which is more kind of about, how are you benefiting on your equity? And then he talks about quick and current ratios, which is really just, can you pay your bills? Then he talks about due diligence in this chapter as well. Did you guys get to this chapter? And I guess, is there anything new that you kind of learned here? Because I know for due diligence, you guys know well, but what kind of stuck out in this chapter for you guys?
Now, I don't know if it was in this chapter or like in this area. I know when he was talking about buying a house or buying rental properties or whatever, it was a good reminder, if you're buying a rental property and it costs you $100 a month after the cash flow, then you only have a limited number you can get. But if you're buying a rental property and cash flow is $100 a month, then there's no limit to what you can do, as long as you can figure out how to stack it. And it's an important thing for me to remember, especially with my rental property. My rental property, it goes up, it goes down. Sometimes I'm really pissed off at it. Sometimes I'm glad I did it, but even if I'm pissed off at it, I'm glad I did it. But then sometimes I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? But again, I think in 3 or 4 years when we go to sell it, we're going to be very happy we did it. But right now it's not cash flowing, at all. It's basically breaking even, if not losing a little bit. But at the same time, I look at it as I'm putting an investment into long term, but at the same time, I want to cash flow. Right. But it's an important thing to remember, like if you're getting into rentals, and just be careful of your money. I'm getting kind of lost at the end of the book. This is why I tried reading it once and I didn't make it. And this time, I'm just being dragged over the finish line with it this time. But it was starting getting ratios and stuff. And I'm just like, all right, all right, Kiyosaki. I'm almost ready to tap out.
So I'm glad that you say that, because I feel the same way. As I was listening, I was sitting on the patio yesterday listening. I did not get I was going to listen to everything on the drive home from Alabama on Sunday. And David, you haven't heard, but I picked up a hitchhiker, and it's quite the story. Sadly, your face. It was a grandma and 2 grandkids, okay? So it was
how the story begins.
Okay, I can't wait to hear that.
It was relatively safe.
That's another YouTube show for another day.
Hey guys, everybody, thank you for joining us with Book Club. Today we'll be going over chapters 41 through the conclusion in Rich Dad's Guide to Investing. And David, you are our fearless leader, so take it away.
Yes. So starting off, Chapter 41, Why Do Rich People Go Bankrupt? So he kind of talks through a few different things here. So there's about 6 that he mentioned. So 1, they don't know how to handle it. So essentially they're using old money habits for new money problems. Then emotional euphoria. So as soon as you get a lot of money, you get that emotional rush and you're like, man, like I must be getting smarter now, where in actuality, he's saying, they're starting to get more dumb. Then 3, saying no to family, yourself, and the people they love. So for me personally, that's probably my hardest one, especially saying no to family for me. Then also, he talks about uneducated investing, which he talks about how to invest in a more educated way throughout the book. And then, 5, fear of losing increases, because essentially at that point, the more you gain, now there's a bigger fear of losing. And then, just not knowing the difference between good and bad expenses. Is there anything you guys would add to that list, maybe? So, for instance, I was thinking, so he talks about it later, but I don't think he mentions it. But, essentially not having a plan for not only your when your business gets more money, but when you personally get more money. What about you guys? You think anything else maybe he could have added, or do you think, do any of these kind of hit home for you guys?
Definitely the saying no to me one, when you were saying that and you said family,
Right.
like, it's very nice of you. But for me, it's like, oh, look we're making more money, so we should buy a more expensive house. Okay, makes sense. We can do that. And then before you know, you still got the same accommodations, but a lot more money going out. And so I saw that one as probably my personal weakness. But I think you're right. We're not having a plan is definitely a train wreck idea of going right to zero fast, because you can't have, it's going to be your weakness. I think the mentality of we got to save all this money goes in first. And so now you're trying to save your money, and then you're thinking that you got to, grow and expand. So you got to spend, and it's easy to go down both paths and then fail in the end.
Right.
Yeah. For me, I would say not budgeting probably needs to be added to that, and not watching your dollars very, very closely. I don't think he really hits on that too much. And that kind of follows having a plan. Even budgeting, Craig and I, we look at our expenses and we look at what goes out. Well, I came across a charge the other day and I'm like, why am I being charged this? Well, I went back and looked. I've been charged $60 every year for the last 4 years through Microsoft. And I never connected the dots, because I was paying a personal Microsoft fee in June, and then I was paying the business Microsoft fee in like December.
Exactly.
And so I just saw an annual subscription, and never, because it was so far apart from the last one, I never really, and I think that, those little things add up to big things. And I think if you have a budget and you look at those dollars and you look at where they're going, helps to kind of plug those holes. Because to me, what makes you lose money the fastest is holes in your budget and holes in your financials. And so I think he maybe could have talked a little more on that as well. Now, as far as my own personal thorn in my side, I would say much like everybody else, it's family, and it's not extended family. It's all those stupid little ankle biters that we created ourselves.
Right. So
how do you say no to them? It's so hard.
One thing that you brought up, Laura, so the budgeting and not watching your money. So I think all of that kind of falls under cash management. He talks about cash management, but he doesn't mention it as a reason that people, don't necessarily do well, because that's a good point. It's like, if you're not managing your cash,
it's managing you.
If you build a team and you don't have cash management, that's like there's an open door for fraud, So and you'll have people to do it. You'll find that one out.